One Night at FLUMPTY'S is one of the most iconic Fnaf fan game franchises. As one of the first ever completely original fan games and with a unique 2D art style and story, FLUMPTY'S is up there with Candy's as one of the few fan games that was so well received that it developed into an entire franchise. So, seeing as I've already covered Five Nights at Candy's in multiple videos, I felt like it would have been a good idea to do some sort of challenge within these games. Though, as I was playing through the three of them, I realized that there really wasn't any kind of challenge that I could do within any of the three games that was hard enough to make a full-fledged video on. The hardest challenge in all of the FLUMPTY'S games is the hard-boiled mode, an extra challenge that you unlock after beating the main night, which is meant to be a harder version of the main game. I had beaten these hard-boiled modes on the first try in every single game, so if either of the three games wouldn't be hard enough on their own for a video, the next logical step of course is to play all three at once. In this video, we're going to attempt to beat what I'm dubbing the Omelette, which is all three FLUMPTY'S games set on hard-boiled mode simultaneously. I had done challenges where I beat multiple Fnaf games at once in the past, but those were the base Fnaf games that I was already very familiar with. Now we're going to have to step into completely uncharted territory to learn all of these games, figure out how they work, then see if it's even possible to beat all of them at the same time. So in order to structure this video, I'm first going to go over how each game works, then we'll talk about the strategy that we need in order to beat all three at once, starting with the original One Night at FLUMPTY'S. It's worth noting that before we get into any technical details that I won't be able to provide super accurate information for these games. The mainline Fnaf games and most Fnaf fan games are made in Click Team Fusion, which I have a lot of experience reading the code in. However, One Night at FLUMPTY'S is made in Game Maker, which I'm sure with enough effort I could get into, but for this video I was just going to go off of field research to try and figure out how these games work. Like most early Fnaf fan games, One Night at FLUMPTY'S is very similar to Fnaf 1. In fact, it is near identical mechanically, with animatronics that come to your doors that can be seen with the lights, and a few special animatronics to enforce other parts of gameplay. In the first FLUMPTY'S game, we're introduced to FLUMPTY himself, Birthday Boy Blam, the Red Man, Grunkfuss the Clown, and the Beaver. FLUMPTY, Blam, and the Red Man work very similar to how Bonnie and Chica would in the original Fnaf 1. With FLUMPTY and the Red Man taking your left door, and Blam taking the right. Grunkfuss and the Beaver work as the special characters in FLUMPTY'S, with the Beaver acting similar to how Foxy works, and Grunkfuss honestly having a very weird mechanic. Essentially, these two work together as the characters that force you to use the cameras, though you shouldn't use the cameras too much. The Beaver will be taking a dump in Cam 6, and you have to watch him to see when he leaves, because he'll be heading for your right door when he does. However, you shouldn't check him too frequently, as anytime you pull up the cameras, Grunkfuss will advance through the wall and slowly make his way into your office. Pull up the cameras too much and you'll die. Honestly, I didn't really understand the point of a mechanic that disincentivizes use of the cameras, but for us, this really isn't a bad thing. Remember, the overall goal here is beating all three of these games at the same time, so while we're figuring out how each one works individually, we're going to have to be looking for some very specific things. In other videos where I beat multiple Fnaf games at once, the most important thing to always look for was downtime within a game, like times when you're forced to wait for a character to leave, or for something to load, which is why in the 4 games at once video, even though it's generally considered the hardest max mode out of the main games, I chose to play 50-20. Despite the precision required to beat it, it has loads of downtime, whereas an easier max mode, like Sister Locations 10-20, is mechanically simpler, but there's zero downtime. As for the first FLUMPTY'S game, I found that you almost never have to check the cameras for the Beaver, as he is really slow, even on hard-boiled mode. Unlike Foxy in Fnaf 1, it doesn't seem like checking the cameras slows him down or anything. I just decided to play through hard-boiled mode a few times to see when he would attack on average, and it seems that 3 to 4 minutes is good for a Beaver check. So we don't really need to pull up the cameras that often. For the door characters, I was trying to figure out exactly how they work, as knowing how much time we can go between light checks would be very useful. But honestly, I didn't think field research would be enough to figure out exactly how these characters work, and I would have to go into the code of the game. I initially thought that they might work on a movement opportunity system, similar to most Fnaf games, using AI values and intervals to make movements somewhat random. And that does make a bit of sense, as things like this can happen. So fair,
Like what?
But as for their exact intervals or chances, I really have no clue. Seeing how unpredictable the door characters can be in this game, I was really hoping that Flumpty's 2 and 3 would have a lot more waiting time that we can take advantage of, as it seems like we're going to have to be checking the doors pretty frequently in the first game, without any real way to predict movements. That about wraps up Flumpty's 1, a pretty simplistic game overall, though still a bit demanding when thinking in terms of multiple games at once. Now it's time for Flumpty's 2. Before we move on to the second game, if you guys are enjoying the video so far, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed. It helps the channel grow and helps me make more videos like this, but of course, only do so if you're enjoying the video so far. Moving on to the second game, this was really when Flumpty's came into its own. A lot of fan game franchises seem to mimic and put their own unique spin on the original Fnaf games with subsequent installments, but Flumpty's went an entirely different direction and had completely unique mechanics and gameplay in the second and third game. The second game revolves completely around a new mechanic, your exposure. In the office, you'll notice a light switch in the center of the room. When the light switch is off, any character that appears won't see you and will eventually go away. But if a character happens to catch you when the lights are on, your exposure will fill up. Depending on who sees you, your exposure can fill up insanely fast and pretty much be an instant restart or be a recoverable situation. So you might be thinking, what's preventing you from just leaving the lights off all night? Well, like the Beaver and Gronkfus in the original game, there are two special characters that force us to open the cameras. The first is the Owl. The Owl replaces the Beaver in this game, as the Beaver apparently drowned in the toilet. The Owl will start on the urinal in Cam 3. When he leaves, you'll have to check the vents to see which vent he's in, then shut that corresponding side. It's worth noting that once the Owl leaves his perch on the urinal, he works similar to Foxy in Fnaf 1, in that if you look at the camera he's in, he'll be instantly forced to your door, but if you don't look at his camera, he has a much larger kill timer that results in the same outcome. For this reason, when the Owl leaves, you should only check one of the vents. Personally, I only check the right vent. That way, if he isn't there, you know that he has to be in the left vent, and you can run out his timer for more time with the lights off. The other character that forces you to use the cameras is the Red Man. Every now and then, you'll get a warning message from within the cameras, as the Red Man attempts to hack you and disable them. You'll have to open the cams and press cancel to stop him, and his window is always in the exact same spot, so normally this won't take too much time. But sometimes, when you're dealing with other games, characters can stack up in your room, giving you no real opening to close the Red Man's window.
Dude! Oh my god.
Aside from these super unlucky situations, I could already tell that Flumpty's 2 was going to be our saving grace for this challenge. For 4 out of the 6 characters, we can just camp in the office with the lights turned off. And for the Owl and Red Man, they can both be dealt with fairly quickly, assuming you have decent aim and speed. The only problem with Flumpty's 2 is that it's going to be a bit of RNG. If we were just focusing on this game alone, then we could track each individual character as they move through the cameras, which would give us a better idea of when they're going to arrive at our office opening. This is especially important for Gronkfus, who has a patience value that you have to watch in the cameras in order to know when he's coming. And we can't afford to lose any exposure to him, as behind Eyesore, he's the fastest character to fill up our meter. Unfortunately, any time that we could use in the cameras in Flumpty's 2 is just going to be taken up by the other games. We're just going to have to hope that no one wants to pull up to the office when we have to do an Owl check or close Red Man's window. Jesus, dude. And all of that spare time is going to come in handy for the most demanding of the 3 games, One Night at Flumpty's 3. If Flumpty's 2 was when the series diverged from Fnaf and became more original, Flumpty's 3 was the refinement and perfection of that same originality. Flumpty has now placed us in some sort of Arctic environment, where we have to move from location to location to keep everyone at bay. In the center room, we can access the cameras and see into a dark hall. Turning to the left, we have the furnace, and on the right, we have a vent. You'll notice how on the bottom left corner of the screen that we now have a temperature icon. Going up to the furnace will warm us up, and we'll have to stay warm or else we'll freeze and be unable to perform any actions, kind of like powering out.
Oh my god, no fucking way I froze. Are we dead ass?
To fend off characters, you're going to have to use this camera. By right-clicking, you can flash into the main hallway, or if you're facing the vent, flash into the vent. Do be careful as you have a limited amount of flashes that you can use before your camera runs out. The cast of characters in FLUMPTY'S 3 is a bit smaller, with FLUMPTY himself being noticeably absent. Grunkfuss and Blam will both appear in the main hall. Make sure that you flash Blam, but don't flash Grunkfuss, as he will jump scare you for it. They can both appear in the hallway at the same time, so make sure that Grunkfuss isn't in the hallway whenever you flash.
They can both be in the hallway at the same time? What?
His path to the hall is from camera 6 to camera 2, then to camera 5. If he's not in any of those cameras, then make sure you wait to flash the hall if you need to. Eyesore also returns, but he won't be visible in any of the cameras. Instead, you'll first see him in the hall, then you'll have to flash him twice in order to make him go away. Our last two characters in this game are the Red Man and the Owl. And Beaver. It's called the Beav Owl. I don't know, these games are weird. The Red Man prevents us from camping the furnace all night, as he'll slowly progress towards it in Cam 4. Once he's in the furnace, turning to that side will result in a death. The Beav Owl works similarly, with progression through the vent, and you'll have to turn to it and flash him like you would with Blam or Eyesore. The last character that I have to mention in this game is Golden Flumpty. In the first and second games, Golden Flumpty would also appear, but similar to Fnaf 1 Golden Freddy, wasn't really a major threat and more of an Easter egg. However, in the third game, you could argue that he's the hardest character. When you're moving through the cameras to check on various characters, you might see Golden Flumpty lurking in one of them. If you drop the cams with his camera selected, he'll appear and jump scare you, which takes away a good chunk of your warmth. For people who instinctively move through cameras fast in these games, like me, this is a super annoying character, as you're forced to wait and make sure that Golden Flumpty isn't present.
That's bitch made, bruh. Yeah, okay. Dickhead.
One Night at FLUMPTY'S 3 definitely requires the most brain power out of all of the games, but we aren't done with it quite yet. FLUMPTY'S 1 and 2 simply had one night and a hard-boiled mode, but FLUMPTY'S 3 actually has two main nights. Once you've completed the main game, Flumpty totally loses his shit and kills all of his friends because they couldn't kill you, setting up the next main night, the Flumpty Night. When playing through the main night of FLUMPTY'S 3, you might feel like there's a lot of downtime where nothing is really happening, and the Flumpty Night definitely fixes that. Flumpty will replace all of the previous characters with versions of himself, some of which are more aggressive than their main night counterparts. Along with mimicking the main cast, Flumpty will also add new versions of himself as the night goes on, with even more mechanics. Two laser doors get added to the middle section of the room, where you'll have to track other versions of Flumpty in two additional side cameras. Another large door also gets added at the very top of the map, where you'll have to track this Flumpty's progress and shut the door within the cameras. If that wasn't enough, the exposure mechanic returns from FLUMPTY'S 2, where this Flumpty will act like Grunkfuss and count down his patience until he enters from the wall. You'll either have to flash him or hide until you can flash him to get rid of him. This adds a ton of chaos to the night, and makes the Flumpty Night significantly harder than the normal night. Hard-boiled mode in FLUMPTY'S 3 blends both the main game and the Flumpty Night, with all of the main game characters being more aggressive. Then the game switches to the Flumpty Night at the halfway point, giving you 50% door power to compensate. When I was first playing these games individually, I thought for sure that FLUMPTY'S 3 was going to be the game that holds back this challenge. FLUMPTY'S 1 doesn't really require that much brain power, and FLUMPTY'S 2 just requires a little bit of luck. But in FLUMPTY'S 3, you have to constantly manage a ton of different characters, and aside from resting at the furnace, there really didn't seem like there was that much downtime. I figured there was enough empty space in 2 and 1 that I could prioritize 3 when I started attempts on all 3 at once, but I soon realized an immediate problem. You see, for any previous videos where I beat multiple games at once, I was able to recode the games in Click Team in order to make them play in a windowed mode, where I could then change the size of a window depending on how important that game was within the challenge, like in 3 games at once, where I gave Fnaf 2 the most space, as it took up the most time by far. But I wasn't able to resize any windows in FLUMPTY'S, so I either had to play the games in their normal windowed size on different monitors, or layer them on top of one another. Even though this might be slightly less optimal, for the sake of better footage, I chose to use separate monitors. So even though the footage that you guys are watching looks like this, from my POV, it looked like this. When I was first starting out with all 3 games at once, I quickly started to realize that my initial priorities were a bit wrong. FLUMPTY'S 3 actually provides a lot more time to do other things than I thought, and FLUMPTY'S 1 has a lot less time than I thought. Originally, I had FLUMPTY'S 3 set on my main monitor, then 1 on my closest alternate monitor, then 2 on the furthest one, but this created a lot of problems. For one, navigating between games felt near impossible because of how I had it set up. Since you turned to either side in FLUMPTY'S 3, having it on my middle monitor meant anytime that I wanted to check a different game, I'd accidentally move in FLUMPTY'S 3, and if the red man was in the furnace, this could result in a death. I tried moving my windows around a bunch to go around the icons that were on screen, but whenever something urgent happened in a different game, I found myself just snapping directly to that game and mousing over a movement icon. Thankfully, there is an option specifically for FLUMPTY'S 3 for click controls instead of hover controls. So now I have to click to open the cameras and move, which normally sounds gross, but here it allows for way easier movement between games. With this new setup, I was able to get some serious runs in, and the more and more that I played, I began to realize some patterns, notably with FLUMPTY'S 3. I started to use a timer in my runs to keep track of where I was in the night, specifically so that I would know when FLUMPTY'S 3 would switch from normal gameplay to the FLUMPTY night, but it seemed like almost everything in the first half of the night was pretty close to scripted. If I could script out the first half of FLUMPTY'S 3, then it would give me a lot more time to deal with FLUMPTY'S 1 and 2, mainly FLUMPTY'S 1. Since I was often dying to jam doors for neglecting the first game. I figured out that in FLUMPTY'S 3, I didn't really need to use the cameras at all as long as I had a stopwatch. For the first 45 seconds, I could just camp at the furnace. Then at 1 minute, the B-Val would always be at the vent and I could flash him. At this point, the red man would be at the furnace, so I'd stall in the center until around 1:15, flash blam, then camp the furnace until 1:30. Usually around 1:30, Eyesore would spawn for the first time. You should check for Gronkfus here to make sure it's safe to flash him, but if I got to Eyesore the moment he spawned the first time, Gronkfus was never there, so we can deal with Eyesore, then camp at the B-Val's vent until 2 minutes. Now I just had to wait until the red man left the furnace again, and I could camp for another 20 to 30 seconds. By scripting out the night like this, I was able to put a lot more focus on FLUMPTY'S 1, and I actually moved it to my main monitor, which drastically increased the consistency of my runs, with most of them making it out of the first 4 minutes. This was made even easier by the fact that unlike other multiple games at once challenges, I was able to hear all 3 games at the same time. With Click Team games, the audio would only play from a game that I was currently clicked into, but here they all overlapped, which does sound a bit chaotic. But it helps out a ton with FLUMPTY'S too, as it gives us the ability to hear when the owl hits the vent, when the red man appears, or when someone shows up in the hallway, giving us a better indication of when we have to check up on that game. The only issue that I was really facing in the first half came down to RNG in the second game, which there wasn't really much that I could do there aside from doing an owl check and closing ads as fast as possible. At 4:30, the transition from the normal cast to the FLUMPTY night starts. The FLUMPTY cast is significantly harder to deal with when we have other games to worry about, but we do get a bit of a grace period. For the first minute of the FLUMPTY night, the furnace will be completely open, as all of the FLUMPTY'S will start in their first stages of progression, regardless of where the main cast was prior to the switch. So we can just camp here in the third game until 5:30. I use this time to really focus on the first game. I don't know why this is, but for me, the first game's hard-boiled mode lasts around 90 seconds longer than it's supposed to. So I was essentially playing with an extended night in the first game, meaning that conserving power is an absolute necessity. I've stated before how I really couldn't figure out how any of the door characters work in this game, but when focusing on just FLUMPTY'S 1, I was able to time out my light checks such that I use as little power as possible. Once 5:30 is up, things get a lot crazier. There are so many threats to deal with in the third game during the FLUMPTY night that I wasn't really able to accurately time out any kind of script for how I play it. I just had to check it a lot more frequently and play based on reaction and memory. It was really easy to get sidetracked during this part, because you have to remember where the main Flumpty in the hall is, how close the furnace Flumpty is, where the Flumpty in the doors is, where the other Flumpty in the big door is, where the vent Flumpty is, and how close the exposure Flumpty is to appearing in your room. The only saving grace here is that the kill timers in Flumpty's 3 are generally pretty big, and you have a lot of time to get wherever you need to be to flash someone or close their door. Really, the only case in which you die is if you completely forget something. In order to keep up with how much was going on during the Flumpty portion, I started to develop a rhythm in the way that I would move through the games. Every time that I wanted to go to Flumpty's 3, I'd have to pass through my middle monitor with Flumpty's 1, and there I could do 2 light checks. And if I wanted to go from Flumpty's 2 to Flumpty's 3, I'd have to do the same. This made it so that there was never really any moments where I missed anyone in the first game, unless I was taking too long with whatever I was doing in the second or third game. Even still, there were a few moments where having to remember where everyone is in every game got the better of me. But after enough trial and error and fully mastering the cycle in as many games as possible, I started up one more game of all the hard-boiled modes at the same time.
Oh my god, dude. Oh my god. Oh, got him. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. Okay, I just gotta green run the shit out of this game, dude. No. Please, bro. Please, 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 please. I just got the beaver, so if it's just him, we're good. I'm sure. Oh god, come on. Oh, thank god, okay. Whew. That's supposed to last... Let me close all these f***ing games, bro. That's supposed to last 9 minutes? But for some reason, mine lasts for 10:50 and I have no idea why. So I played a harder version of 1. Whatever, I'll take it. Hey, we did it. That took, I think, let's see, 1 hour and 10 minutes. Cool. I really hope you all enjoyed this video. I know this isn't anything super crazy compared to the hell that I went through in the last few FNAF videos, but I'm cooking up some big videos, one that will actually maybe top Hopeless Greed. Maybe, we'll see. And this just seemed like a fun and semi-interesting challenge that I could do in the meantime while I was preparing those videos. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching. Peace.